I wondered actually about the '06 bargaining, and one of the assets that was on the table was team contraction, and that's an interesting asset because I guess it's not really part of the collective bargaining yet. It impacts the players tremendously. So strategically, it was a great move from the ownership in terms of getting things moving forward. And I wondered if you see that as an asset that may be on the table again in the future for baseball in the next collective bargaining agreement.
I do not, and it wasn't on the table in '06. That was something that had been raised previously, and you know, what's changed the dynamic really is increased revenue sharing in baseball, and it's a much healthier sport economically than it was, a decade and a half ago when that was being considered. So wasn't on the table in '06 at all. It's not something anybody on our side of the table would wish for, and I don't see it being raised anytime soon.
I have a question for both George and John. We talk about the 50-inch television, and increasingly it can be fed through the internet, not just the cable contracts, not just the schedule. 5 years from now, or the trend in the direction for somebody like the Padres or the NFL, what do you expect in this breakdown between kind of the schedule, normal contract, and then the on-demand through the internet sort of flow of funds?
I think one of the biggest challenges is the existing contracts in the media are done on very much a silo basis. So you've got broadcast television separate from a sort of internet deal, separate from a mobile deal. And that world is not there anymore. Basically, if I want to watch the Indian Premier League, and at the moment I can only get it on the internet, I can hook up the internet to the television and get it. And so what's happening is that the other side of the negotiation table, be it Comcast or ESPN, is trying to have a bundled rights. And that works well as long as there is only one broadcaster on the side. But if you look at the NFL situation, where there's 4 or 5 broadcasters, it's the NFL on ABC, Fox, NBC, ESPN, and each of those 4 items is demanding exclusive internet rights. Something's got to break. And we don't quite know where that's going, but that's one of the biggest challenges out there. Is we know the media is merging. How that plays out in the rights is going to depend. If you're a sport like the NFL, you probably can't do an exclusive, although they did with DirecTV on the Sunday package. But if you're a weaker sport, it's putting the negotiations on the broadcaster who offers that package in a very strong position.
Yeah, I think it's, TV revenue is obviously, along with ticket revenue, is obviously the lifeblood of any professional sport. I think, and I'm speaking now as somebody who's at a club whose TV deal is up at the end of the year, so I want to be careful what I say, but I think that our television partners are extremely important to us. I think if you step back though and you look at that overall industry, I have a little bit of a minority opinion. This is my personal opinion. I think that we as consumers have gotten used to the idea over years that we will buy our cable television as a buffet type of purchase, as a smorgasbord. And really, if you sat down and you thought about it, you probably spend 90% of your television viewing on 5 channels, 10 channels maybe, that you probably have 300 or 400. And you don't really have the option to go in there and buy them a la carte. And so that sets up interesting dynamics where you have these big battles where there's a broadcaster who wants to have their channel included in the basic cable tier because you're going to get broader distribution, and that's worth more money, and the cable company doesn't want to include it in the basic tier, and so you have a big fight, and that's happened in the sports world, most notably with Yes. I think you wrote a case on that, George. But I think that there's no reason why to assume that that's always going to be the case. And Chris Tolley, who runs broadcasting at Major League Baseball, disagrees with me vehemently on this, but I suspect personally that it won't always be the case. And in fact, if you look at the internet now, you're already seeing this technology in this market jump, right? You're going from a buffet model where you have to buy every channel to now you're skipping the step where you can buy individual channels, and now we're going right to the step where you can buy individual content, right? I don't have to subscribe to HBO to be able to get Entourage. maybe that's a bad example, but you can go online with iTunes. You go online to other websites, and you can purchase individual shows. You don't even have to buy all the shows that are on that one channel. And so, the real question, I think, is whether television, whether it's over the air, over cable, over satellite, over the internet, whether it moves more in that direction, where content is sold at those kinds of prices, in that kind of a model, like music is, where you can buy an individual song and you don't have to buy the whole album anymore. If it does move in that direction, then what does that mean for the value of sports television properties like the Padres? Is it good or bad news? That's something we need to figure out.
One of the breakpoints just on this is that the tiering of the ability of teams to get larger rights fees is not very flat. So we've just seen a big deal done by Los Angeles Lakers for $125 million on a 20-year deal with Time Warner. That is potentially 12 times what 7 or 8 of the NBA teams have. And so this is sort of, people are sort of thinking the tiering's like this. With the RSN deals, the tiering's going like that. And that's a very dramatic change in what the power base is, especially if you move to a world that Roger Noel was talking about. It's going to get even more extreme, and it'll look like English Premier League, which has got positives and got negatives.
I have a question for John. As I understand it, the Padres own 1/30th of MLBAM, and isn't that a wonderful way to go? Because somebody signs up for a contract on their cell phone to get all the major league inputs, and I don't know what it costs a month, but it's a lot of revenue. And there's a company owned by Major League Baseball in New York who's doing a couple billion in revenue now, and that is privately held by 30 teams. Isn't that a way to participate in this?
Maybe if you could explain that a little bit too.
Sure. So one of the many, when you look at the economic, if I can back up a little bit to your question, one of the many differences, or one of the major differences between the NFL and Major League Baseball as businesses is the disparity in revenues. And that disparity is really driven by one thing, and it's the way broadcast rights are owned and sold. In baseball, those broadcast rights are owned by the individual teams and sold locally, for the most part. And in the NFL, they are owned by the league and sold, and those revenues are shared evenly. It's probably too late to put that toothpaste back in the tube when it comes to television broadcast rights, but we were fortunate in that the commissioner and his team in the late 90s formed a company called Major League Baseball Advanced Media and got the 30 owners to cede their internet rights to this combined entity at a point in time when, candidly, they collectively probably didn't realize what those rights would ultimately become worth. And so, with respect to internet rights, we as baseball are very much in the same position with internet rights that the NFL is with broadcast television rights. And if you believe that over time, value is going to shift away from broadcast television and to the internet, if you think that that's the way people are going to consume their content, then that means, presumably, that if the agreement can hold, that revenue disparity in baseball will be reduced, which I think is good news for competitive balance. The question becomes, can that hold? And over time, as the Yankees and the Red Sox realize the increased value of their rights and how that's being collectively shared with everybody else in the league, will they continue to live with that agreement, or does it become part of the whole?
You say, can those rights be held? I don't quite know
Oh,
because couldn't Major League Baseball take that entity public? And that's 1/30
Right. If you have enough owners vote to dissolve that arrangement, you could dissolve it.
What arrangement?
MLB Advanced Media.
Well, I guess my question is, why would one want to do it?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
They wouldn't necessarily want to.
An asset there,
Yeah.
which I understand is worth a lot of money.
Right. Yep.
So why would you want to get rid of that asset if an owner of that Major League?
I'm not. I don't want to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I do. I'm saying that at the time everybody agreed to that arrangement. They didn't. I think that those rights were viewed as relatively equal and not all that valuable. Today, I think everybody understands that the New York Yankees internet rights are worth a lot more, candidly, than the San Diego Padres internet rights. and yet the Yankees and the Padres share equally in that arrangement. That's good news for the Padres. Frankly, it's probably not great news for the Yankees. And the Yankees don't have the votes right now to blow that up, but might they over time? I don't know.
It's always, go ahead.
It's not that you're blowing up the assets, you're changing the equity ownership. And so the Yankees, if they redid that agreement, knowing what they knew now in 2000, there's no way, in my opinion, they would have agreed to a 130. They would have demanded much more.
That's correct.
That's correct.
I think maybe we can continue this
Yeah.
over. In the far back, the pink shirt.
Yeah. Hold on. Two questions. So the first one, I think the Yankees tried to stream on their own locally, and they sold just a few subscriptions. So it's the same bundled approach that cable uses, in which BAM survives ultimately. So it's hard for a team to go on their own without getting all that money. But my real question is this: is for John, what is the next market Major League Baseball realistically could expand to?
You mean, how do you mean expand? You mean in terms of
New
another team?
franchise, yeah.
You know, I don't think there's
Or a
any-
relocation.
Yeah, I don't think there's any serious discussions of expansion or relocation of franchises. I don't think that's something that's top of mind for anybody at baseball right now. I think when we think in terms of expansion, we think in terms of expanding the reach, expanding the brand.
Well, I'm just asking you, like, what would you, if you were making that decision, like, what would be a good market you think could support a franchise in a profitable way?
I don't know that I have an answer for you, unfortunately. I don't know that I don't know that expansion would be something that I would recommend.
Just on that, I think the MLB is different from, say, NFL. NFL, there's no minor league system. So we already know from the AAA team, so like the River Cats up in Sacramento are a vibrant market. And you could sort of make the argument that they could be a more valuable franchise in MLB than one of the bottom 30. But the MLB has a closed system. But so we know what are some attractive markets because of the AAA market system. The question you're asking is a little bit more relevant to the NFL. Where would be the 33rd team placed, or where would Jacksonville or Buffalo move to, or San Diego?
Yeah,
Well-
I appreciate that. So do you see, John, a contraction before an expansion?
No, I don't. I mean, I hate to be boring, but I just don't think there's going to be a lot of change here. I think 30 is the number you're going to see for.
There's a
some time.
Goldilocks number, it sounds.
Cool.
That's my
Oh.
personal opinion.
Thank you.
Well, one last question. Go ahead, just shout it.
Yeah, I shot it. So is there any way to estimate the trademark rights value or the brand equity at individual team and league level? How does those value estimates play into the negotiation?
Well, I mean, if you ask me, could I put some valuation numbers and approach it? Yeah, the answer is yeah. I mean, I think valuers have to do that all the time. And when you have minority interest in teams, and those minority interests are selling some of their shares, there's always a market which you value, and you can sort of look at what were the comparable transactions that were made for partial ownerships, what were the asset values underlying those assets. So there is actually a fairly active set of exercises going on with real transactions that value teams and value the rights in those teams.
Well, let's continue this conversation just because we're at time. And